Welcome back to the Virtual Firearms Association. I am Frank, and we are back in the virtual range again today discussing what to do on a traffic stop when you have a firearm in the car. Let's discuss. Hey, before we get started, we have those gifts down in the description. The first one going to be the downloadable and printable targets to include even a sighting in target. It's going to help you when you hit the range and do your live fire training. Plus, it saves you some money, some time, so you don't have to run out to the store and get them. For the most part, it's everything you're going to need. However, if you want to do more, we have that free full online course for your basic pistol and marksmanship training. And you can use your own firearm to do all the training. If you have a laser system to help assist, it'll go hand in hand with that, but it is fully there, downloadable, free. Watch it, train anytime. Both of those gifts are from us to you, so we hope that you use them and enjoy them. Now, let's discuss what to do on a traffic stop and exactly what you should be prepared to encounter. I'm not going to dive too much into the legal aspect as to what legality you have if you want to try and how do I want to push this? If you want to try and enforce your rights. I'm talking mostly being safe here. Yes, you can push things a little bit farther, and some of these may not always sound the greatest for protecting your rights, so to say. However, the goal here is to keep you safe and to prevent any mishaps from happening on the side of the road between you and law enforcement. So first things first, turn on your hazard lights. If you see a law enforcement officer attempting to pull you over while you're driving, it's just good practice and courtesy to turn on your hazard lights. That way it informs them that you are aware that they are there and that you will be pulling over at the next location. You're going to want to pull over at the first safe spot that is possible. Some law enforcement may actually get agitated by this because they want you to pull right over and they won't turn on their lights unless they deem that you're at a safe spot, which is good practice by law enforcement. However, sometimes we fail to recognize in law enforcement that we may see a safe spot or we travel this road all the time, but you might be unfamiliar with it. So turning on your hazard lights informs law enforcement and everyone else around that you are complying and you are aware that they are attempting to make a vehicle stop on you. Next, when you finally pull over and you're in a safe location, put the vehicle completely in park and even to the point where you can turn off the vehicle. However, this can get a little bit tricky too, because if you turn off the vehicle prior to them approaching and you don't have your windows down, then you're going to have to put your hand back on the keys to turn it on to roll the windows down. So I'm a big proponent of actually leaving the vehicle running unless they ask you to turn it off. And that's just for your safety. Maybe it's a hot day, maybe you got air conditioning running, maybe you have kids in the back. There's so many different what ifs in these situations. So I'm a proponent for leaving the vehicle running. However, if you feel more comfortable turning it off, that is what would make law enforcement feel the most secure. And it would allow, you in a legal argument to say, hey, I made no indications of this. But then if you have to reach to turn it back on, you don't want a jumpy law enforcement officer taking that as an indicator. Make yourself visible. This is where I was saying it's not everyone will agree with this, but roll your windows completely down so the law enforcement officers can converse with you freely. Now, this is all for the purposes of you having a firearm in the vehicle, whether that's locked up properly in the trunk or you're concealed carrying or whatever. This is just so that you're not giving law enforcement any other reasons to be agitated or suspicious. I understand that most people may not like to roll their windows all the way down when it comes to law enforcement. But at the same point in time, this will allow a situation to be de-escalated a bit further if you don't have any windows all the way up or cracked. And it makes law enforcement feel better. So that's just specifically discussing safety on this one. I know not everyone's going to agree with this. Place your hands visibly where they can see. That means up on the steering wheel is usually the best place. Don't have your hand anywhere near where the firearm is, especially if you're carrying it. up on the steering wheel is the best place. And then that way law enforcement can say, hey, when I approached, I had complete view of their hands, and it's going to appear on their body cams as well. Additionally, you don't want to be reaching for stuff prior to the law enforcement officer approaching, because they can actually use that to pull you out of the vehicle and search the immediate area thinking that you're trying to hide something. There's plenty of case law on that. You don't want to give them that ammunition, and you don't want to have to get out of your vehicle if you don't need to. So keep your hands up on the steering wheel. Don't reach for anything until law enforcement get up to your window, and then just remain professional and say, hey, the documentation you're looking for is in my glove box or in my center console. Which brings me to the next point of it is, don't keep your firearm where your documentation is, because that's just a bad day. I've seen that turn bad so many times. I actually prefer that if I'm driving, all my vehicles have my documentation up on the visor, because at no point in time can anyone say I'm not reaching or I'm reaching for my firearm if I'm reaching up to my visor where my documentation is. But I still advise law enforcement, hey, my documentation is up here. Can I grab that? Great, good to go. I appreciate it. If you're transporting, whether you're transporting a firearm legally or you're carrying a firearm on your person under concealed carry, when you're reaching for those documentations, as I said before, announce it. Say, hey, I'm going to reach for my documentations. That way they can't say, hey, you did a furtive movement. One thing I like to do is I carry my wallet in my back pocket. Of course, that's where my ID is, my driver's license. Well, when I get in the vehicle, for two reasons. One, for comfort, so I'm not always sitting on my wallet and hurting my hip. But two, for this particular scenario right here, if I'm ever stopped by law enforcement, I'll keep my wallet up on the dash so I can reach up there. Once again, hands are in a visible location, and I reach up to the dash, and that really helps me get to the situation where I don't have law enforcement saying, whoa, what are you doing? What are you reaching for? It's clear, it's articulated, it's verbalized, and they can obviously see what I'm doing. Follow their instructions, of course. I'm not going to sit here and say that all law enforcement are equipped to handle these situations as well as others. Just like any profession, some are better at their jobs than others, and some take their training more serious than others. So a lot of law enforcement who take their training serious understand individual rights and do not want to violate that, while other people and other law enforcement officers don't really. I have an analogy for this. Is what do you call a doctor that gets all C's in med school? Well, they're still a doctor, and maybe you have to get B's in med school or whatever. But what I'm getting at is what do you call a doctor that doesn't get the highest marks in med school but still passes? They're called a doctor. Well, we have the same thing in nursing. We have the same thing in teaching, and we definitely have the same thing in law enforcement. What do you call a police officer that doesn't get the highest marks but still passes? They're still a police officer, right? It doesn't mean that they're not an effective police officer. It just means that other people maybe understood material a little bit better than them. So don't argue with them. That's not the place. Courts have already deemed on the side of the road is not where you argue with law enforcement. Be respectful, be polite, go about your day, and stay safe. That's the main goal, is to just get back on the road, finish your travels, whether that's with a citation for speeding or whatever the stop was for. And then if you want to argue it or fight it, the time to do that is in court. I hope this really helps. The big thing that we are trying to push here when it comes to these trainings is the fact that there's so many different scenarios, and you can what if anything to death over and over again. And it's just not conducive. So you prepare for the most likely situation. You prepare for every situation, but you prepare for the most likely situation. And then that way, if that situation does occur, which is statistically what it's going to occur, your involvement with law enforcement will most likely be on a traffic stop, then you're best prepared for it. You're able to handle situations safely, effectively, and then move about your day. That's the goal here for this training. I hope it helps. Listen, those gifts are still down in the description. The first one is those downloadable and printable targets. Use them, save money, save yourself time. That is the whole purpose, so that you have no excuses for why you're not training. Additionally, the full marksmanship and basic pistol course is in there. It doesn't matter if you're an expert or a beginner. It has something in there for you, and it's going to take your shooting to the next level and your safety. So why fight with something that most people would pay a lot of money for? Stay safe, and we will see you next time.